Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello. Good morning. Welcome to it. It is April 1. No fooling today. It's April 1, April Fool's Day. And we are just ready to crack into it and get things up and ready for rock and roll today. It's going to be a lot of good stuff to talk about. We're going to be joined here in just a few moments by Representative Jamie Allard, who's going to give us the lowdown on what she sees happening in the legislature so far this year and some of the different challenges that have been presented to the legislature and the majority, including the discussion on what's going on in the House Education Committee and how things are going with the replacement for SB 140 and what's going to happen with the dividend and the budget and, well, a little bit of everything. That's what's going on here this morning, and we're ready to. We're going to be talking with her here in just a moment about that. Then in hour 2, we're going to be joined by candidate for U.S. House, Nick Begich. Nick Begich III will be joining us, and we'll be talking with him about, stuff at the national level, what's going on around the country, and what can... what he sees as the solution and what we can do about all that stuff going on. So it's a full show today. It's a full boat of shows and stuff to do. So we're ready to go. And we hope that you're going to be sticking around with us throughout the week. We've got a lot of good folks coming on board. Tomorrow is Brad Keithley and Chris Story. Chris Story is actually on for 2 segments tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit about his newest book that he has coming out in the first segment, and then we'll get our weekly positivity and positivity out update and life coaching lesson in the second segment. That's, of course, after Brad Keithley gives us the full Monty with the weekly top 3. In hour 1, and then later on, I've got some other guests that I'm working on for the rest of the week, including some folks from Reason and more. And so it's gonna be a busy week, busy week, and I hope you guys are all ready to stick around and deal with it every day. That's what we try and do. We try and bring you the best. From stories from around the state to get you all squared away. What are some of the stories that are floating around out there that we'll see? I love the commentary from the ADN and the headlines. Ira Samuels had a headline from Friday that we didn't get a chance to get into. Because it came back a little late. Lawmakers float irresponsible draw for permanent fund earnings to pay for dividends. You can't You can't make this stuff up. You just can't make this stuff up. This is the dividends have come from the permanent fund earnings since the beginning, right? I mean, that's where they were tasked with coming out of, was out of the permanent fund earnings. And yet this is the quote unquote irresponsible draw, because it is because it's higher than because it's higher than what the powers that be really want. Bryce Edgman is the one that is apparently coined the irresponsible quote when asked about drawing money from the permanent fund for a $2,200 permanent fund instead of a $1,300 and change one that they want from the 75-25 plan. He said, "I couldn't think of a more irresponsible vote I could take." It's just, yeah, I just couldn't think of a more irresponsible vote that I could take, because how dare you want to take the statute or even get anywhere close to the statutorily provided amount of money, which would have been a lot more, by the way. It would have been well over $3,000. But this, of course, is, it's irresponsible to, no irresponsibility for cutting monies out of the communities for, not providing people with a statutory dividend that helps them in so many ways. Not irresponsible to just ignore the law instead of actually going in there and fixing it, and having these dueling laws between the statutory PFD provision and the SB 26 POMV draw. None of that is irresponsible. What's irresponsible is proposing a bill that's larger than what the powers that be have defined as the right amount. That would be irresponsible. Everything else, just, not good. Julie Colomb is quoted in here, and I think she gets the quote of the day on this. She said, "I've always said, follow the law or change the law, but it's clear we have two statutes kind of crashing into each other right now." Well, yeah. Yes, congratulations. # follow the damn law. I mean, why? Why are we not? And then Will Stapp got in here and made this tongue-in-cheek deal where he proposed paying for the full dividend not by drawing from the earnings account, but by cutting $800 million from the state budget. That would require, by his calculations, cutting the state's entire public safety budget. And he just goes, I'm sure Will is a really nice guy. He's always been really nice when I've met him and talked to him, and we've shaken hands, and, we've chatted on the air and everything else. But his just this kind of smarmy point of saying, well, let's cut $800 million from the budget. And the first thing we need to do is we need to cut all of the Department of Corrections. And because now we don't have anybody to, because now we don't have any place to put criminals, we'll release all the criminals. And then since we don't have any place to put the criminals, we'll go ahead and we will just cut all of the Department of Public Safety because they're not needed anymore. And then we'll cut all of the judges because and the whole judicial branch, because now we don't have to. I mean, it's just, come on, it's just ridiculous. It is. What do they call it? Reductum ridiculum. Reduction to the ridiculous. I mean, that's not what people are asking for. And of course, it's another example of cutting into the heart of something and cutting something that people are really afraid of. Oh, so we'll just cut all of the Department of Corrections and we'll release all these criminals out into the wild. Oh, and then we'll cut the police because you're not going to put them anywhere. So we'll just cut the police on top. I mean, it was I mean, I was so irritated by the whole, because it was just a charade. It was just some shenanigans where he's trying to prove a point in the most painful way possible. Basically telling people to stop asking for cuts to government because it just apparently can't happen unless they cut into core government services like public safety and corrections. That's the only way that's the only place that they could find cuts, apparently. He said, I tend to believe that we probably should have corrections, a court system of public safety. He said, I think these are probably good things. In order to pay a statutory dividend, the state either needs to reduce its expenditures on government or tax people. You have no other options. He said, I believe that the size and scope of our government can absolutely be reduced. I don't believe you can cut $1 billion out of it. I don't believe you can cut $800 million out of it because would have catastrophic consequences. Well, I mean, I think he might be right at this point that you probably couldn't cut the full $800 million out of it. But there could be some trimming done in there, and not in this ludicrous way of cutting, $800 million out by basically eliminating DPS, corrections, and the judicial system. I mean, yes, that's a big. How about taking $800 million out of education, Will? You notice he didn't use that as a cat's paw. He didn't use that. He didn't use that as a stalking horse or a suggestion. I mean, it's so irritating when that kind of stuff happens. And I watched the actual thing get. I mean, I saw the whole thing get put down there, and it just get laid out in on gavel to gavel. I'm watching him lay this thing out, and I'm like, what is he doing exactly? What is he going? And then he started going on, and I'm just like, oh, come on, man. It's just reduction to the ridiculous at that point. I mean, well, he basically is just trying to tell people that we can't possibly cut the size and scope of government because we need everything that's there. No talking about the unfilled but funded positions that are in the state government. No discussions on consolidating, school districts or unifying the health care amongst the various districts to save money there. No, I mean, ideas that have been floated around for quite a while to talk about, none of those things brought up. No, it's this ridiculous idea that we need to eliminate everything from corrections, public safety, and judicial because, we obviously don't need those things anymore. We need a dividend more. He's not a friend of the dividend. He's not a friend of the dividend by any stretch. He has never been since the very beginning. You'll remember he was on the program when he basically said he was not going to support the full dividend because it would require taxes. It would require some form of tax to pay for it. And when asked about cuts, or UAF, or maybe we could find some spots in UAF that could be. It's just so frustrating to see. So frustrating to see. And this is a member of the majority, right? I mean, this is not somebody in the Democratic minority. This was somebody who was in the majority. And utilizing these kind of ridiculous ideas to criticize people who would want a full PFD, even though that's not what's being asked for. This is 67, 20, 28, 67. It's basically the 70-30, almost the 70-30 plan. So 1/3 dividend. That's, it's not even a full 1/3. Well, he represents a military area, says Barbara. They don't get a dividend. Well, maybe they should. Maybe they should. All right. We're going to take a quick break, and we're looking for Jamie Allard to be joining us here, starting in just a moment. We'll be we'll be back. That's how it works. We'll return in just a moment. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return right after this. Don't go anywhere.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Hello, my pretties, and your little dog, too. Let's see. I'm going back here to see what you guys are. My first thought, says Terry, was there goes my blood pressure. Hey, I'm just here to help you. Just here to help you. Mike says that's why I stopped reading the ADN years ago. The overdraw would have paid for big government, not a small dividend. The overdraw would have been paid for the big government and not the small dividend. Yeah, I mean that's exactly that's exactly it. That's exactly right. That's the thing. That's what the quiet part out loud is. They want to use it for government, and they know better than you how that money should be spent. That's the bottom line in that regard. Brian says, cries of irresponsible from Juno. Cindy says she's been sick, horribly sick last week. Well, Cindy, I'm glad you're still with us. I'm glad you're back. Glad you're feeling better. PFD should be the first call on the budget, says Barbara. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, that's right. Drama. Good morning. How about a cut to the bloated administrative state all the way around in all departments? Yeah. I mean, there are so many places that you can find some efficiencies in there. But I mean, again, it's this reduction to the ridiculous where they're like, okay, well, we'll just cut the most painful thing and to flare your fear, we'll just empty out the prisons and let them out on the street and then reduce all the cops so that there's nobody there to do the arresting. And then we don't need no judges. And that, I mean, it was almost painful to watch as he tried to lay it out. And I was just like, that is nutty. All right. I'm just double checking here. Jamie is late, and we were texting last night, and she said that she was looking for the link in the email, and yet I haven't heard from her yet this morning. So I don't know where she is yet. So we might have to continue this discussion. Protest today, 9 a.m. at the Fairbanks Snowstar Borough School District demanding Brandy Hardy to step down, says Kelly. Well, I heard that there was a lot of testimony in favor of Brandy Hardy's testimony, that she, defending her, and that there's a lot that the letters from the folks who were demanding she step down, that the written commentary was evaporating. And that she was getting a lot of support now from the NEA crowd, both verbally and written. So she may get away with it. That's, All Jeannie's talking about when the UAA and UAF being land grant universities, that they should be self-sustaining. She said, I can't agree more. They need to develop prime properties and liquidate other properties to pay for infrastructure. They're supposedly smart people. You'd think they would have a finance professor to manage it. You'd think. You'd think. Chris wants to know, didn't they just pass a bill for state-funded daycare? How about just stop spending more? Well, good luck with that, man. Good luck with the idea of just not spending more. That just seems to be the default position at this point. Just spend more. That's what it's all about, baby. That is what it is all about. All right. We got to get back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the stuff that you need to do.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. Jamie Allard, we're waiting for her to show up this morning. I was just double checking my text messages from last night. We were chatting, and we're supposed to be rolling here this morning, but we'll see what we can come up with. We're hoping that she comes in here in the next couple minutes, so we can get some discussion talking with her right now. The Alaska Beacon, James Brooks, is chronicling a interesting conundrum that's going on in the legislature, and that is the internal friction that's happening with the Bush caucus. And he goes into a little bit of a history lesson here about the history of the Bush caucus, which has been, well, I mean, I'll just read it because it's a pretty good little synopsis here. It says, for more than 5 decades, a group of rural Alaska lawmakers known as the Bush caucus have at times played a king-making role in the legislature. Rural lawmakers have frequently put regional interests above those of party loyalty, and their willingness to cross the partisan aisle has frequently given them outsized power in the Capitol. Last year, the group's willingness to join Republicans swung control of the entire House. But this year, the group known as the Ice Bloc appears to have cracked, with Republican Representative Thomas Baker of Kotzebue often on the opposite side of votes cast by Representatives Bryce Edgmond, Neil Foster, and C.J. McCormick. And it goes on to talk with these folks a little bit about this. Edgmond says it's certainly a departure from a time-honored tradition, which is unfortunate. Meaning he can't get Thomas Baker to toe the line, and that's unfortunate that he can't graft control of this whole thing and swing it like a club to get more done of what they want. And it's interesting. It's interesting to see what this is all about. It was surprisingly, when you look at the votes for the veto override, it was, of course, one vote that made it all, that made it all over the top. And Thomas Baker happened to be one of the votes to sustain the veto, which was, again, exactly opposite of what Edgmond and Foster and McCormick had done themselves. They all voted to override the veto. Baker's response, which was in an email, I think he's pretty smart here. He's not engaging in an actual interview with with James Brooks, but he responded to questions in email, which I think is, in this case, you're never going to look great if you come in an interview, because they're going to try and spin it. What I mean? I've talked to some folks here recently who have had some dealings with the newspaper on some of this stuff, on some of these things, and their reaction was, well, let's just say it was telling. They're like, that's the story that they ended up telling on the paper is not exactly what I said to them, kind of thing. Like, there was a lot of spin. Kind of hard to spin some of the when you're just responding to questions in written form. It's a little bit more difficult to spin it. Anyway, Baker said in response to emailed questions, because he did not respond to requests for an in-person interview, which I probably smart. He said all the legislators have a responsibility to fight for their districts, and it's no different for those of us from rural Alaska. We all have unique needs for the areas we represent, and I would say we typically agree on things, while there are other times we may have different strategies about how to do what is best for our people. Now, of course, the next thing that gets happen here is that they start slinging around accusations. Foster said that they feel like maybe because he was appointed by Governor Dunleavy, that he feels like he owes a little bit of allegiance to Governor Dunleavy, because Foster said when he was appointed by Governor Parnell, he felt that way. He felt beholden to Parnell until he was elected on his own merits. I mean, talk about, wow. Anyway, I'm sure that this article will do nothing to heal the cracks in the ice block at that point. And then you had the whole thing with McCormick, where there was this blow up in the committee, which I forgot which committee it was. That was which was the committee that regional affairs, community and regional affairs, where McCormick kind of got rolled out of his own committee because he was talking about, he wanted to have the ACLU come in and testify about these deaths at the Department of Corrections, while the ACLU is currently in a lawsuit with the state of Alaska about this. And Kevin McCabe, objected and said, look, we're in the middle of a court case here. And he asked, could any of the stuff that was used or questions raised in this committee meeting be used to support one side or the other of this lawsuit? And Ledge Legal said, yes, they could be. And so he objected. and Baker, at that point, Thomas Baker joined three other Republican legislators in voting to cancel the hearing on the prison deaths. And McCormick was quoted as saying, I think that there's going to be some hostility here. He says, yesterday was pretty brazen, and I'm not really super happy that I got pantsed like that on the record. He got pantsed, which is, I mean, that's a hysterical imagery right there. I got pantsed on like that on the record. When he was asked about it, Baker said, my intent was to follow the uniform rules of the legislature. Following the distribution of the memo from Ledge Legal on the topic of ongoing lawsuits, I felt it was most appropriate to not suspend the rules and not to hear the intended presentation, because they were asking to suspend the rules to do so. Anyway, it's good to see, that they're all not monolithic and uniform in this, and see that there are some cracks in that ice block. That doesn't hurt my feelings at all, because they are right. It is an outsized club that can be used against the majority, especially when they are the reason that the majority is made up like this. That is the reasoning why they swing such a big club in that regard. Is because they have a lot of leverage when they're the reason that the actual majority exists at this point. So good for them. Good. Good for them. But between that and the irresponsible draw from the PFD, those were two of my big stories today that I didn't even know what, except for the fact that the Alaska has now received a stern warning from the U.S. Department of Education over the state's distribution of money to local schools. They've now designated Alaska as what they call a high-risk grantee because it said the state failed to provide adequate funding for low-income schools during the COVID pandemic. They said the American Rescue Plan has over $125 billion to schools across the country. And they said in a letter on March 27th, the Department of Ed says that as a condition of receiving the $359 million in COVID funding, Alaska is required to give $30 million to the highest need schools in 4 districts. The Alaska Department of Ed said that it disputes the claims in the strongest terms possible. According to a March 22nd letter, the state said it had already complied with the federal requirements and that it doesn't believe it needs to give out additional funding to districts. This is an incredibly surprising conclusion considering we funded our schools as we always have, said Dina Bishop in a statement on Thursday. But that apparently not good enough for the federal officials. In its 27 March letter, the U.S. Department of Ed listed the amounts federal officials said were still owed to 4 Alaska school districts. So now we got the federal government down in this is what happens when you take all that quote unquote free money. Now they're going to tell you the winners and losers. They're going to tell you where it can be spent, who it can be spent on, and everything else. In the 27 March letter, the U.S. Department of Ed listed the amounts federal officials said were still owed to 4 Alaska school districts: $16.6 million for the Anchorage School District, $9.7 million for the Kenai, $3.1 million for the Fairbanks North Star Borough, and just over $200,000 for the Juneau school districts. These are the ones that are in the this is the need. This is what it's all about. This all relates to a maintenance of equity provision in the American Rescue Plan, which is a new for federal funding measures. It requires states not to reduce funding during the pandemic for low-income students at the highest need schools. The Alaska Education Department said it made no such reductions and that the state's funding formula was equitable. But this is a hot mess right here, folks. This is a hot mess going on right here. When they are now the Biden administration is now weaponizing the Department of Ed to come in and to play a little frisky with Alaska's funding mechanisms. They didn't change anything. They didn't cut anything. They gave out the monies, but it wasn't enough monies. Anchorage Democrat Loki Tobin, the chair of the Education Committee in the Senate, said that the high-risk designation is a serious matter. The federal government could look more closely into the Education Department's finances, which could place a greater administrative burden on already strained state officials. I just feel like she's cackling gleefully in the corner is what I feel like at this point. I feel like that's what's actually going on. All right, we got to go. We'll be back with more in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't forget, Nick Begich is going to be joining us at the top of the hour, and we will return right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Well, I'm just going back through here to make sure that I knew the right times. And yeah, I mean, I had everything down. It's all good here. All right. Let's go back over here. I'm just going back through here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's an election year. Yeah. Prison deaths. Micromanagement at its finest. Terry says, David Boyle, could you please post your link on how much money is left from the COVID money in the school districts? Because it was a lot of money. It was like $70-something million was still left over. We need to rescue America from the rescuer, says Herder. Wait, isn't Anchorage sitting on a buttload of COVID money? Yeah. Yes. Jim says Brandy Hardy might be nominated for sainthood here in Fairbanks. Yeah, I was hearing that the testimony was like 2-1 in favor of Brandy at the meeting the other night, which is fine. That just means that a lawsuit might be inevitable if they don't hear that. Maybe the state should never have accepted any of that money to begin with. I mean, that's the problem with federal money, right? Now they're going to get down into the minutia and demand that you fund specific districts with it. What? I mean, what? The Bush caucus is broken, says Willie. Even McCormick's ex-girlfriend has filed to run against this year. Oh, man. Could you imagine the headlines or the radio campaigns? Hi, I'm CJ's ex-girlfriend. He's horrible. That's why I'm running against him. Oh man, just say no to federal dough. Yep. That's 100% accurate. David says the entire state of Alaska received $265 million in ARP funds, $265.4 million in ARP funds. Of those, $68.9 million, some 21%, has still not been spent. That's the thing. Yeah, it's a big chunk of money that's still out there. Absolutely. Oh, Tawny, what was this? I don't recognize what you're talking about. Despite a head-on car collision in a terrible snowstorm, I had a joyful Resurrection Day celebration. Oh man, I hope you're okay. Were you in this collision? Was that you personally were in that collision? I hope you're okay. Yeah. Rita says the only reason that Brandy had all the people speaking for her behalf on Thursday evening is because many of us who signed up to testify did not even get within that first hour of cutoff time. When we called in to testify, they gave us a number to testify, but when the time came, they changed so that we could not speak. Once again, just like the left does, they rig the system and don't follow the rules. Well, again, I'm not surprised, but disappointing nonetheless. Disappointing nonetheless. Tawny says, yes, she was in a head-on. Well, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you're okay, Tawny. That was, man, there's been some wicked accidents. I looked out on the roads yesterday and I saw some of the commentary from the people driving up and down the road. And the one guy said, I've been driving up KGB for 3 decades. He said, so when I say it's slippery, I mean, it's slippery. It was polished glass yesterday. So I'm glad we didn't go anywhere. All right. Anyway, I guess this is it. One final segment. We're going to dive into this and get things going. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that kind of stuff. Here we go. Let's do it right now. Here we go. Like it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Well, I didn't need that cast aspersions on my intelligence or my intellect. That was wrong. Yeah, I don't know, Jamie Allard. We'll have to reschedule her for later this week, I guess. Don't know what happened. Like I said, we were in contact last night, but sometimes stuff happens. So we'll see. We'll see what comes of that. We were just talking a minute ago about this stern warning from the feds, and what does it mean? What does this whole thing mean about this commentary on making that we are now a high-risk grantee? Well, essentially, it could put other federal funds at risk, that they may not be able to give us more free money, which is obviously not free, right? I mean, that's what it says. Obviously, it's not free money because they're going to tell you how exactly you need to spend it. The Dudley administration was given 30 days to request $30 million be appropriated for the 4 school districts, or it could present a plan on how it would resolve its non-compliance with federal law. Now, the state's already asserting that they're not complying with federal law. That's a double negative, I know, but that they are in compliance with federal law. That they didn't change anything, that they just said that you couldn't reduce weed. They didn't reduce anything. Legislators have sought answers this year from the State Department of Ed on whether the extra school funding would need to be added to this year's budget. Kodiak Republican Senate President Gary Stevens on Thursday said through a prepared statement that the high-risk designation was a great concern. He says without a plan and quick action, our local schools could be out additional federal resources, and the responsibility will fall onto the state coffers to fill the gap. $30 million. There's just no answer. For months, there have been correspondence between the state and the federal education departments over the maintenance of equity requirements. A March 18th letter showed some of the U.S. Education Department's concerns were resolved. 2 districts were taken off the list for extra funding or had their allotments reduced. Karen Morrison, Director of Finance and Support Services at the Alaskan Education Department, said through a prepared statement Thursday that the changing amounts allegedly owed to districts showed the issue had not been decided by federal officials. Again, going back to this idea of the maintenance of equity provision. The provision says the states should not and cannot, or required the states not to reduce funding during the pandemic for low-income students at the highest need schools. And the Department of Ed in the state said there were no such reductions. The state's funding formula was equitable. They didn't do any of that. They didn't reduce anything. But the feds disagreed. Juneau is experiencing an unprecedented budget crisis because they had, I love how they said, significant accounting errors. That's what that's the story, and they're sticking to it. Significant accounting errors due to flat state funding and significant accounting errors. I mean, millions of dollars. In December, the district was told by federal officials it was owed an additional $2.5 million. On March 4th, state officials said that they owed Juneau nothing. By March 18th, the U.S. Education Department said Juneau schools were now owed $200,000. Which is it? It sounds like this is a moving target. The feds on the beginning of the month say $2.5 million. The state says nothing. The feds come back and say now it's only $200,000. What is it? Nobody knows. This is some serious leveraging going on by the Biden administration, trying to bludgeon the state into giving money to the biggest areas that they can. And in this regards, the Anchorage, the Kenai, Fairbanks, and Juneau. Of really which only the Kenai is the one that the rest of them are all the bastions of the blue bastions of the state, right? But even they don't know from the first part of March to the March the 18th. So in a 15-day window, it went from they owe you $2.5 million to nothing, or to $200,000. I mean, what is going on? Well, it sounds like even the federal government doesn't really know what's missing. But they've got the power because they have the pocketbook. They're the ones with the purse here. I mean, what was the amount of money that they just said that we're just getting ready to get? Where is it? I'm sorry, I'm scrolling backwards here. A March 27th letter from the U.S. Department of Education says that as a condition, not the federal COVID funds, that the state is ready to receive right about now something like $400 million in federal COVID monies, or not COVID monies, but regular federal funds. I mean, at some point you have to understand there's nothing free about any of that money. All of that money has a hook in it. And here's part of the hook right here. If you don't do with the money what we tell you to do, and we can change our mind on a day-to-day basis because we're the federal government, if you don't spend the money the way we tell you to spend it today, then you don't get any more free lucre. You don't get any more booty. You don't get any more of that. The first hit's free. All the rest of them, you don't get that crack from now on. You get, you got all that great government. Oh, dosh. Oh, you need it all. But you better do what we say and not disagree with us. A spokesperson for the Anchorage School District said that last Tuesday that district officials understood the state was still in the process of appealing the federal requirements. The $16.6 million allocated to Anchorage may not be final, nor is there a timeline for resolution. I mean, they still have, what did they get? They had $100 million in their fund balance, including a big chunk of that COVID money already. They already got something like, David Boyle's in the chat room. He can tell me. I thought they already got like $68 or $70 million in COVID money directly. But now they get another $16 million? I mean, what? Fairbanks has still got $4.3 million left of their COVID money in the bank? I mean, who is putting all this? Who's putting this together? Who is manipulating or is pressuring the Department of Ed at the federal level to try and push back at Alaska and affect the local governance of our schools? So first and foremost, why do we have a National Department of Ed? That's my first question. Because that thing's only been around since the Carter administration? It hasn't been around that long. And do we really need it? I know Ron Paul fought for years to get the Department of Ed pulled aside. It's pretty obvious we don't need it. We can control our own schools. Thank you very much. We can take care of that. We can make those decisions. Thank you very much. We don't need you guys to do that. But stop taking all the damn government money and they wouldn't be able to control you the way that they are now. I mean, that it is, oh man. The Senate Education Committee is scheduled a hearing next Wednesday, which would be this Wednesday, on the maintenance of equity requirements and the high-risk designation. The Alaska Department of Law advised the Education Department to decline the invitation because a response was being prepared and the funding issue had not been resolved, Tobin said. She said, I find this deeply troubling because I think it's clear there's been a mishandling of the situation. There's been miscommunications. There's been a lack of communications. And added that with the high-risk designation, we do not need to find ourselves in this circumstance again. Which, I mean, starts making me ask the question of, did you make a phone call? I mean, I'm just asking, did you make a phone call to somebody of your friends at the administration, the Biden administration, to put this pressure on Alaska? Because again, nothing changed. We didn't reduce anything. They got more money, and most of these places still have money in the bank. Now, maybe it's been encumbered, right? Maybe they've decided what they're going to spend it on, but there's still money in the bank, and they're like, no, we need more. We need more. And remember, says David, the Department of Ed, the U.S. Department of Ed, approved Alaska's plan early on because they had to submit the plan to begin with. So this is, wow. Just freaking wow. We got to go. Hour 2. Dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Okay. Think Loki might have called Nancy's girl Mary? Well, that's possible. I mean, Mary is Nancy's girl, right? Oh, Nancy. Oh, Nancy. Oh, Mary. Oh, Nancy. Anyway, I just don't know. But when they're about, maybe we should ask Nick about this, because when you're going to use the federal government as a bludgeon, you're going to give the money, you're going to approve the plan, then you're going to come back and start beating the hell out of the state and telling them exactly where they're going to spend their money. I think we call that federal overreach. I mean, that's just me. But again, why did, just say no to government dough, folks. I mean, just say no. Why? Because then they can pick winners and losers, and they've got a crappy track record of picking winners and losers. I'll just tell you that right now. A crappy track record. I don't care which government it is. They've got a crappy track record of picking winners and losers. This is what happens when you intervene in the private markets. Just saying. Just saying. Oh, I get so agitated by that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I like to know who in the back room made a phone call and said, "Hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Why don't you come talk to? Why don't you come to the state and beat them up for the monies that they, oof." Herder says, "Yes, that's about the tip of it. So pervasive, and this money was taken from other productive enterprises to begin with. Same story, just more, what, nefarious?" Yeah. Have I read JD's piece this morning? I have not read JD's Two Chilies piece this morning, but I have wanted to talk to him about something else, so maybe I'll have another excuse now to call him this morning and talk about that after I read that piece. But I'm working on seeing if we can get some folks from Reason on this week to talk about some other stuff. Okay. Well, Nick is in the green room. He's tired of listening to me. Whine about this. Let's go over here and we'll do some audio testing and et cetera. Wait a second. Commissioner Bishop had a great response to the USDOE. Just sent you Dina Bishop's deed response. Okay, I'll go take a look at that here in a second. But first, Nicholas Begich the third joins us this morning. Good morning, Nick. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing this morning?
No complaints. Nobody listens anyway, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, we're ready to go. This governmental overreach, man, I swear to God. This every level of government, every dollar has a hook in it somewhere. And I think somebody just felt the tug on that hook here in the state of Alaska with that money. What do you say?
I think that's been a challenge for the state of Alaska for many years. I don't think there's anything new here. And we talk about this when I'm on in different ways. But the reality is that we've made a deal with the devil by relying so heavily on the federal government in Alaska. We have allowed them to exert an extent of control over a state that prides itself on self-reliance, and we're seeing them try to wield that right now. Your last segment was talking about that. The reality is, when the feds down in D.C. know that they got us, they're going to use that leverage. And I think this is the problem, as you point out, with things like the Department of Education, where you can get the money, but you're going to have to follow our rules. You're going to have to spend it our way. You're going to have to do the things we say.
Right.
And then you have a situation, as you point out, maybe this is true. I guess time will tell whether there's people here, even locally, that are trying to use this as a political tool to change the way the state works by working with their counterparts down in DC. So,
this thing gets even worse, Nick. I just read the response. David Boyle just sent me the response from Dina Bishop, and we don't have a lot of time here. We'll get back into this, but I'll just give you a preview. She said, "This is an incredibly surprising conclusion, considering we funded our schools as we always have, and that Alaska has been applauded by several outside entities for the equity of our school funding formulas, including Rutgers University, and the fact that the U.S. Department of Ed had to approve the plan to begin with. So all of a sudden, this is like the whole bump stock thing. They just changed the rules after 3 letters of determination, 4 letters, 5 letters, 12 letters of determination that it's legal. Somebody just pencil whips it and says it's illegal now. I mean, that's."
I don't think that in our lifetimes we've seen a more politicized administration coming. Biden and the people that he's brought in as appointees, they've done every single thing they can do to weaponize the federal government against the states. And if you're a conservative state, God help you, because this is. He's got it out for us and for any other red state in the country.
All right, Nick Begich, hold the line. I'm putting you back in the green room. You're back in the corner. We're going to be back with more of the Michael Duke Show. Hour 2 continues right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FEM translator. That's FM translator. FEM translator. For those of you who don't know, it's good morning and welcome to it. It's hour 2 of the Monday edition of the show. Oh, it's going to be snowy down on the peninsula and in Anchorage today. Up to 12 inches is what they're saying. I can't. I just like, what? Yep, winter weather advisory. It's 28 degrees. The roads are like a slick griddle, so be careful out there if you're driving in the south central area and down on the peninsula today. That's all I'm saying. All right, we just got done with hour 1, and we're now diving into hour 2. Waiting in the wings is candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, Nicholas Begich III. He's going to be joining us here. I just want to say it's like the Thurston Howell voice. Here's the third. He's going to be joining us here in a hot second. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff, including government overreach. We were just talking about this in the last hour, this whole thing where the Department of Ed is now apparently, from the external viewpoint, looks like it's been weaponized against the state of Alaska. We'll get his take on this and more, plus all the other stuff that's got the borders and the Ukraine and the thing and the deal. And oh, there's so much we could talk about. And of course, our favorite topic, Nick and I's favorite topic, arithmetic, math. How do you get away from the math? I don't know, but they're doing it in Washington, D.C. every single day. They're getting away from it. They just ignore it like it's going to go away, like, you know, a chronic case of crabs or something. I don't know. I mean, you know, something. Anyway, we're going to jump into this right now before I really get in trouble. We're going to bring Nick Begich on the program this morning. Hello, my friend. How are you? You like that, huh? I just likened the entire
you make me laugh every time. Every time you make me laugh.
STD or something. Okay. Nick, I guess we should start off. I know you were listening a little bit there at the end of the program where we were talking about this stuff going on with the Department of Ed. And I think it's appropriate to bring you on board to talk about this, although this is a state issue. What this is really about is that this is about the federal government is essentially coming in and saying, you didn't spend enough of the money, you didn't put enough of the money, and we're going to direct you which parts of the money should be spent where. Now, that's not normally how these grant processes work. And more importantly, let me just quote this from the response from Dina Bishop, the director of Ed. She said the state of Alaska provided a letter last Friday explaining how the state has already complied with this requirement. The letter adds that the U.S. Department of Ed has moved the goalpost, which makes it difficult for states to have a clear understanding of how Ed was interpreting the maintenance of equity requirement. This is a typical move by the federal government, by the way, to move the goalpost. Oh, here's what you need to do. And when you hit it, oh, no, what you really need to do is move. You know, this is a huge problem. This is governmental overreach.
It is governmental overreach, and what we're seeing is the Biden administration's repeated attempts to try to fundamentally transform the United States by using federal money and federal programs to change policy at the state level, policy that belongs at the state level. And we've seen it over and over from the Biden administration, this weaponization of federal funding, this weaponization of regulations. And from day one, from day one, the policy of the Biden administration has been to make their moves, ask permission later, force us to take them to court and adjudicate it in the courts, which often takes, years until we can get a ruling that has exhausted its appeals. And so we see this with oil and gas development. We're now seeing it, as you're pointing out, in education, but everywhere that they can throughout the purview of the federal government and beyond, as you point out, overreach. The Biden administration is trying to use the time that they have and the power that they believe that they have to change this nation through 1,000 cuts, and that's what's going on.
Hey, remember, Nick, the first taste is always free, right? I mean, that's what it is, right? And we have become so enamored with federal money in this state. The congressman for all Alaska, Don Young, God love him, was so strict in so many ways, but also at the same time was very adamant about making sure that he got his slice of the pork belly every time it came through. Ted Stevens was famous for, always making sure to fight to bring home the bacon and do everything else. And we have become so addicted to federal money in this state at every level. It's almost become an inevitability. It's like we would not be able to function without that tremendous influx of federal money, which I think is eventually going to go away for one reason or another. Math. I mean, I just,
That's right.
at some point, and if we don't start to wean ourselves off a little bit now, it's going to be tremendous. And of course, there's always the problems like this, where now you're seeing the hook in that bait.
Mm-hmm.
And they're dragging you around by the cheek, do what we say or else. This is a huge problem.
Well, and here's one of the reasons that it's a huge problem. Okay, so it's not just a problem for the United States, or rather for Alaska. It's a problem for the United States. The problem is when you get a couple of states like Alaska, where you can convince their delegation over many years that taking the budget and approving something that you wouldn't otherwise approve because there's a little bit of extra bacon, as you say, in the bill, and a spending bill, you're going to get just a few senators to say yes to things they should be saying no to, because they say, well, it's good for us. Problem is, it's bad for the nation. And if you do that repeatedly over time, that's how you land in a debt situation that we're in right now, $34.5 trillion. I think when we started talking a couple of months ago, more regularly on your show, we were at 34. Now we're at 34.5. We're soon going to be at 35 trillion. So the problem is that these little compromises seem small in the moment, but they have a way of compounding over time and creating problems for the entire country. And so, we've got to be strong and say, look, yes, I recognize that we have gotten funds in the past for all sorts of things, but we're going to kill the goose. We're going to kill the goose that's been laying these golden eggs. This is not good for the state in the long run. And I know people say, hey, we got to do what's right for the state. Yes, what's right for the state is also what's right for the country. We have to do what's right for America first, because we're all going to go down with this in the same ship if we're not thinking about the bigger picture.
Oh, come on, Nick. To quote a former Fairbanks North Star Borough Mayor Chief of Staff, if we don't take the money, somebody will. We've got to have that money.
The problem is, and I've mentioned this before, and I'll beat it like just a dead horse. We got to be out there recognizing that the reason why we're continuing to take this money is because we've been denied the ability to develop our own state, our own resources in Alaska. This started, you mentioned Carter with the Department of Education. That wasn't the only thing he did. He put ANILCA through. ANILCA locked up enormous amounts of Alaska lands, very promising mineral prospects and oil and gas prospects throughout the state were taken offline or further restricted, and really hampered our ability to chart our own course and to make our own way in Alaska. And the strategy the delegation at that time was, hey, we're going to get this fixed, but in the meantime, we're going to start saying yes to all these government programs. Well, we really haven't gotten that legislative curse fixed for the state, and instead we've become addicted to this federal money. And now we've caused ourselves to believe that we can't live without it. You know, and I call this a case of Stockholm syndrome. We've fallen in love with our captors, right?
It's true. It's true.
We've fallen in love with the people that have taken Alaska captive. And what we need to do is we need to stand up and we say, no more. We're going to develop the things that we were promised under statehood. And for those who've been in Alaska for any amount of time, you know that under the debate that was occurring prior to our accession in the United States as a state, the conversation was, can Alaska sustain itself? Does Alaska have the ability to pay its own way as a state? And the idea was, if we could develop the resources we had, the answer would be yes. And so an agreement was struck, a promise was made between the state and the federal government to say, yes, you will have the ability to develop those resources, and we'll help you develop those resources because it's in our nation's interest to do so. And over time, they've reneged on that promise. And what we need to do, instead of saying yes to every federal program that comes our way, we need to say, no, we're not going to be complicit in the destruction of this country by saying yes to more and more and more unpaid for federal spending. Instead, we're going to assert our rights and the promises that were made to our state prior to statehood.
That's a pretty tough stance to take, Nick. I mean, you're running for office here, man. You're running for Congress, and you're not giving us the I'll put a chicken in every pot and I'll bring home the bacon and the pork. And it's got to be a tough sell when people like Peltola and others are like, "Oh, all that government money is good. All of that government money is good. We need to get our share of." Doesn't matter if it's fake money. Doesn't matter if it's made up in thin air. Doesn't matter if it's going to bankrupt the country. We need to get ours before everybody else does.
This is the problem with America right now. This is the problem with America's politicians, is they're only thinking one election cycle at a time. They're thinking 2 years in 2-year blocks, and our global adversaries think far longer term than 2 years. The Chinese think 25, 50, 100-year plans. And when we're planning things quarter to quarter or only year to year, fiscal year to fiscal year, you don't look at the long stretch, the long term. And that's a huge threat to the country. We've got to do what's right for our nation long run.
Right.
And yes, sometimes that sugar high feels good in the moment. When we had all that COVID spending, wow, man, everybody was making all kinds of money. And then we find out the bill comes due. You say, well, hey, my taxes didn't go up. What do you mean the bill comes due? Inflation came due. Inflation was the consequence of all that so-called free cash. And it turns out, not only did we pay for it, but we're continuing to pay for it, and we'll continue to pay for it forever, because those prices are not going down. They're going to stay just where they're at and rise. And the problem with that is this. Inflation is worse than taxes. And the reason why inflation is worse than taxes is because it taxes the poor as much as the rich, right? You think about somebody that's on a fixed income, a retiree, or somebody who's, making minimum wage and they're struggling. Maybe they've got 2-3 jobs. This person has to pay a greater percentage of their income as a result of inflation than someone who's wealthy or even middle class. They're not able to bear the increased food prices, gas prices, the way that others are, and others are struggling too. So the challenge is that when you think you're getting something for free, you're not. You're going to pay for it. We're all going to pay for it one way or the other. And our failure to exert discipline has resulted in all these problems. And I've said before on this show, these aren't private sector problems. No, despite what the Democrats want to say. These are government problems created by government and foisted upon the American people. And what's really unbelievable about it is that a politician will create the problem and then they'll come to you and say, oh, we need to solve this. And what's their solution? Spending more money, creating more problems. It's like they never learn their lesson.
Wait, you mean that those evil food companies raising their prices is not that's inflation? It has nothing to do with them trying to pad their bottom lines by, cutting the size of the ice cream container and doing all that kind of stuff.
Look, I mean, if you think about this, and for those who have ever watched, I would encourage folks, if you get a minute, watch some of the material on Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor is the CEO of MicroStrategy. Very intelligent guy. One of the things that I was actually sitting down with my 12-year-old son this Easter weekend. We were watching some videos from Michael Saylor. What he was talking about was inflation and what it really is, what it really means.
Right.
Think about food and think about commodities like iron ore and copper and some of these things. What happens is year over year, we figure out how to make food a little bit more efficiently. We figure out how to mine a little bit more efficiently. We figure out how to drill and explore a little bit more efficiently. And that's how the free market works. They drive costs down. Okay. So when you see these prices increase year over year, it doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't increase over year. These prices should go down because the productivity of these industries goes up, right? And so what happens is as we abuse that reserve currency status, as we print more cash, things that should be going down in price over time are actually rising. And it's fascinating as he broke down the difference in the way that we measure inflation and the way that inflation actually occurs. And what he was saying was the CPI, right, the Consumer Price Index, as a measure of inflation, is probably one of the worst measures of inflation you could have, because it measures these commodities, it measures these food prices, it measures things that are the cost of what I call the cost of survival, not the cost of living. And if you were to truly measure the cost of living in the way that it was measured in the 70s, we're at double-digit inflation, have been for the last couple of years.
Man, you're full of good news. All right, we're going to be back with more. Nick Begich is our guest, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right, Nick Begich is our guest. Sorry about that. I shouldn't have asked you that last question right before the break, but
those are a complicated topic before the break. But here's something that so there's people that advise me, when you're running a campaign of this magnitude, you get a lot of advice, right? And one of the pieces of advice that I'm regularly given is, Nick, you're talking too technical. Nick, you need to dumb it down. And I hate that advice. I hate that, because look, we got to be upfront with the facts. We got to tell people the truth. We got to make sure they understand exactly what is going on, because these are the kind of things that you don't tend to hear on mainstream media. They want to make the topic so watered down that it doesn't mean anything anymore. And I think these are complicated topics. Yes, they can be unwieldy at times, but we've got to make an effort to try to understand exactly what's being done to us by people in DC, or it's going to continue.
Right.
And I know we're getting technical, but I will not shy away from the detail on these topics.
Well, no, and that's why, honestly, this is why I don't do interviews I try not to. Sometimes it's forced on me by the interviewee, not by me. That I try not to do interviews that are any less than at least, 2 segments, 40 minutes at least, because you can't just do these little soundbite. I mean, it just doesn't work. I mean, that's what people love. But look at what some of the most popular, for example, some of the most popular podcasts are like Rogan, where he sits down for 2 hours with somebody and does something. I mean, there's a reason why the long form podcast and the long form interview is starting to make a comeback, because you can get down into the details. And that's what people, I think, are hungry for. Sure, there's a lot of people out there that are like, top level, scrape the top. I got it, whatever. But we need to get down into these details because that's what matters in the long run. That's how they've deceived and inveigled us over these years, is by giving us the 148 character tweet and assuming that that's fixed the whole problem, right?
Yes.
But no, we've needed this long form discussion for a long time because people are not dumb. They can understand it. If they have an interest in it, they'll hear what you say. And if they don't understand all of it, they'll go down and maybe do a little research on it. Go look at Michael Saylor or whoever and figure some of this stuff out. I mean, and that's what we should be doing. That's exactly what we should be doing.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, the reality is, if we don't educate ourselves, if we're not willing to go down those trails and figure this stuff out, it will be figured out for us, and in a way that does not advantage us, right? It will advantage someone who's sorted this stuff out down in DC. We're trying to go about our daily lives, trying to make ends meet. And, the financial engineering that's occurred, and not just in government, but on the private sector too, over the last 50, 60 years, it's constructed to harvest the consumer. I want you to think about those words, because those are words that I chose with intention. Harvest the consumer. Like a crop, we are being harvested. When you think about the average 17, 18, 19-year-old coming out of high school, what are they told? What are they told implicitly? They're told, hey, you need a car, you need an education, you need a house, right? And guess what? We're going to help you get those things. We're going to help you get those things with a loan, and a loan. And don't you worry about it, because everything's going to be just fine. And these people, we all do this. I mean, I did it myself. We think we're building a castle. In reality, we build a prison for ourselves that locks us in for 20, 30 years, because we bought into the financialization, the idea that we can have everything today and there won't be a cost to it. And it's fine. I'm not saying that these tools of financial engineering haven't brought some good to the nation. Okay.
Right.
But people walk into this stuff with their eyes shut, oftentimes, not understanding what we're doing. We're doing the same thing at the federal level.
A quick example of that is, look at today, how they never give you the full price of anything. It's always what the monthly payment will be, right? It's always what you can afford on the monthly payment, not the fact that you're going to pay 2.5 times what it actually cost because you're spread. I mean, it's a prime example of it right there. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Nick Begich, our guest. Let's do this thing.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Telling us what he really thinks, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Nick Begich, our guest. One other comment, Nick was like, they're only planning from election to election. They're not planning on the long term. Nick, at this point, they're only planning from continuing resolution to continuing resolution at this point. I mean, really, let's get down to it on that. We're talking about, now there's been a call to remove Mike Johnson as a Speaker of the House. Why? Because when he became Speaker, one of his promises was he would bring us back to regular order, which included passing 12 separate budget bills, as Congress is outlined and supposed to do, and hasn't done for 18 years, 17 years, something like that, with the continuing resolutions. He got started and immediately went back on that promise. And so now there's been a call for him to be removed as Speaker of the House, which would be the only second time in history that's happened. And all of it comes back to the fact that we're not doing business in the Congress the way we're supposed to be doing business. They're doing these continuing resolutions with raising the debt ceiling, pretending it's all going to be okay and that the math is all going to work out. It's crazy. This is where we're at right now.
Yeah, part of the problem too, and you put your finger on it there in that setup. But the reality is, so many of these politicians are more afraid of losing their job in the next election than doing their job right now. And I think that's really, when you really boil it all away and you want to know what is really going on, it's that people are so afraid of a government shutdown that they lose all their negotiating power, and they say, look, we'll cut any deal, we'll do anything, just make it happen, make this go away. And that's not all Republicans, but that's too many. It's too many Republicans. One thing that folks have to recognize is that, the Democrats are saying that they're willing to shut the government down. Now, you won't hear that on NBC, you won't hear it on CNN, but it's the truth. They're willing to shut the government down. Many of the bills that were passed under regular order last year, the Senate, the Democrat-controlled Senate, said, we're not even taking those bills up. We will say no to those bills. And even to the point where they were saying they were willing to shut things down on their side in order to stand for the things that they believe in. Now, the problem is, if we're not willing to do the same thing on the right side of the aisle, we lose all negotiating leverage, because we're telling them, we'll just cut a deal no matter what it is. Let's just not shut things down. I'm not for a shutdown, but I am for getting these systemic problems fixed permanently. And if that requires some temporary, shutdown or work to occur to get serious about this, and that's what it takes. And I think most people are there at this point. I think most people are ready to say, hey, you guys need to stop taking vacations, stop taking district work periods, stop the fundraising, stop all this stuff, and do your job. And until someone is willing to do that in DC, this is sadly going to continue, my opinion.
And I think you're right. I mean, again, most people don't understand. And so maybe we break it down for just a second here. What is happening in Congress is that they're not getting the work done. They're not getting the work done, and they're not doing it in the proper way, because the second that a new Congress critter shows up down there, you're immediately told, start raising funds for the party, start raising funds for the thing. You're not in there doing the work of the people. That's being done by the elite leadership of the chamber, and they're lining everything out, and they're not putting anything out on the floor for discussion until they know they've got the votes. And then there's really no discussion. They just voted up or voted down.
That's right.
None of that Mr. Smith goes to Washington discussion on the floor is really happening.
Well, you know what? It's not happening. And for folks who ever turn on C-SPAN while Congress is in session, you can see almost always, very rarely, is everyone in the room or many people in the room. Most of the time, people are giving a floor speech. There's no one around. Even in committees where you would expect people to show up in the committees, many of these committee hearings will have one or two folks show up, and then they rotate in and out to ask a witness questions. Outside of things like judiciary, your standard committees oftentimes don't have more than two or three people in a room. And there's reasons for that. I'm not going to say that there's not reasons for that, but it's problematic, because you're right. Many of the speeches, the impassioned speeches that you see pop up on Twitter or on Facebook maybe, or even in the nightly news, there's nobody in the room listening. It's just a speech given to the Congress that's not present. They're out. Maybe they're having fundraisers or other meetings or other things are happening, and no one's listening.
And I think this is how do I want to put this? This is what's going to kill us. This is what's going to kill us as a nation, is if we keep going down this road. I mean, you mentioned that just the beginning of the year, we were at $34 trillion, and now we're at $34.5 trillion. By the end of the year, it'll be 35 or 30. We're still going to spend $1.2 trillion in debt service this year. I mean, we're putting on more than we're spending in debt service. And by the way, when Nick and I first started talking 2 years ago, what was the debt at then? 28 billion, 28 trillion. I mean,
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Just think about it. In 2 short years, we've increased the debt, not the deficit, the debt by $5-6 trillion, $7 trillion. And that can't go on. It's unsustainable.
Yeah, it's unsustainable. I mean, here's the thing. It can go on, and it will accelerate to the point where the dollar is worthless, right? So what can't go on You can keep doing it, but you can't keep doing it and hold the value of the dollar. And just this weekend, gold hit an all-time high. All-time high this weekend, Easter weekend. Why? Why would that happen? Because people are losing confidence in our ability to exert discipline. And the reality is that it becomes theft. It becomes theft on you, perpetrated by the government, stealing your savings, stealing your retirement, stealing the value of your work. And again, part of the problem too is, and let's be clear, there are many members of Congress who don't understand this. They don't understand this. They weren't elected in a manner in which this confirms that they understand this. So they understand that if they can get cash for their districts, maybe they'll get reelected, but they don't understand what that does downstream to the economy or to the individuals that they're supposed to be serving.
I would posit that some of them don't care. It's what can I get now?
That's right. There are many, sadly, that's their mentality. There are so many problems to fix. I mean, people have asked me, Nick, how are you going to go down there and fix all this? Well, I'll tell you straight up, I can't do it myself. I can get elected. I can go down there. I can be another voice of hopefully reason in the Congress, but it's going to take districts across the nation, congressional districts, House districts across the nation, those voters to send like-minded people down there who are going to be serious about fixing this problem, not serious about creating a career in politics, serious about fixing the problems of our country. And there's a huge difference between those two kinds of people. Some people are interested in seeing how long they can serve. Can I be there for 30 or 40 years? That should never be the goal. That should never be the goal. The goal is to go down there and fix the problems of our nation and put us on a better trajectory. And you mentioned earlier, how do you talk like this and expect to win a race in Alaska, right? Well, the reality is we've gotten polling back here in just the last couple of weeks. It's not our internal poll. It's a third-party poll that shows that I'm now tied with Mary Peltola, 50-50. When I entered this race last July, we were down 13 points. So the things that I'm talking about, people understand, they agree with.
Resonating. Yeah, it's resonating with people. Mm-hmm. Which, and again, because I think people are frustrated. They're tired. They're sick and tired of the same old rigmarole. They're tired. I mean, what have you done for me lately, Mary? Not a lot. I mean, she's been, she's voted with Nancy Pelosi, 80% of the time. But what else have we gotten out of? We haven't gotten anything. It's just like MIA. I mean, there's nothing going on. What is happening? And can we make a difference? And can we fix what's going? That's the big thing. Can we fix what's going on? We got 1 minute here, Nick. I'm sorry. I'll let you respond to that. We got about a minute here.
No, I clearly agree. And, because we only have one person in the United States House from Alaska, 435 members, one person from Alaska. That person's got to think big. It can't just be go along to get along, you take an occasional vote with the other side so you look like you're crossing the aisle. No, you've got to put forward an exciting plan for this state. You got to show the rest of the Congress just how important Alaska is and how much opportunity we can provide to the rest of the nation. That requires leadership. That requires the ability to get people excited and motivated. And we're not seeing that with Mary Peltola. We have not seen those big ideas. We have not seen that big leadership. And that's what we need. Don Young, whether you like Don Young, didn't like Don Young, he provided a vision.
Right.
He provided a platform where people, at least they would understand what we could do if we were allowed to do it in Alaska. And we're not getting that right now. We need that again for our single representative in the U.S. House.
Nick Begich. Nick Begich is our guest candidate for U.S. House of Representatives. We're going to be back with more here in just a moment. One final segment with Nick. We're going to talk about borders and security and military-age males, Chinese. I don't know. We're going to talk about a lot here in the next segment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're back. Nick doesn't have a beard, but I've got enough for both of us, so it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. All right. Sorry. Susan, who is our resident devil's advocate here, says, well, she brought home infrastructure money as a freshman. I mean, did she really? Did she really? That was kind of a foregone conclusion at one point. I mean, did she really bring it home, Nick?
Look, I think part of the response here is what are we defining as infrastructure, and what did she do? The infrastructure bill, so-called, was loaded with a whole bunch of things called human infrastructure. That was not Mary's bill. That was Don Young's bill in the House. It was a bill I didn't agree with, to be honest, because it didn't have enough infrastructure in it. And the reality is, there are a couple different ways you can analyze infrastructure. One way that you can analyze infrastructure is on a per capita basis. Another way that you can analyze infrastructure is on a per acre basis. Infrastructure is supposed to open areas up that weren't previously open. And if you look at the amount awarded to Alaska under the infrastructure bill, you'll see that we got less per acre than any other state in the entire country. Alaska is the youngest state, or the second youngest state in the country. We got a lot of catching up to do. If you're going to invest in infrastructure, make sure that it's real infrastructure and make sure that it's going into areas that don't previously have it. I'm not talking about potholes, right? Filling potholes. I'm talking about new infrastructure. There's a comment in the chat about, there's a comment in the chat about connecting us up to rail. That's something that President Trump made a priority toward the end of his first term in office. There's an opportunity for Alaska to be connected up to rail, drive the cost of living down in Alaska, because we can then ship things up more easily from lower 48. We can also ship our resources out more inexpensively. And, that's hard infrastructure. That's real infrastructure. This so-called democratic human infrastructure is not infrastructure. It's just another way to relabel something and call it that you normally just call wasteful spending. And we saw that again by the Democrats with the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which actually increased inflation and was a massive climate bill and has been called so by Joe Biden himself. So let's first start by saying, what is real infrastructure, right? Those things are not real infrastructure. They're huge, wasteful projects. And they've been mislabeled in a way so that they can be merchandised to the American public and be sugar-coated. But the reality is these things are nothing but, as Mr. Duke said just a few minutes ago, they're picking winners and losers, trying to transform the American way of life and economy.
It's a whole lot like this carton of ice cream is marked as chocolate, but it's really mint chip. Who eats that stuff? My God, that's what happens, right? I mean, that's what's going on, is that they're, it's the infrastructure bill. How much infrastructure is actually in the infrastructure bill? Not a whole lot. I mean, when it turns out that it was loaded with all different other kinds of spending things, it's astonishing. And again, like you said, most of the people who end up going down there to Washington, D.C. seem to be looking at how can we make sure that our districts get ours for whatever we need. I mean, it's like the Jones Act. Do we really even want to talk about the Jones Act? Something that, that is so problematic and has been, was revoked during COVID to fix some of the issues of the things. And, the question is, why does it still remain? Protectionism. I mean, you got places that are still supporting the Jones Act because purportedly it was meant to protect shipbuilders in the United States. You've got states that are still supporting the Jones Act. It's like its own inertia. They don't even make ships anymore in these states, and they're still protecting it because, well, we've always done it that way, so we've got to do it that way, right?
Jones Act was supposed to be temporary, and like many temporary government programs, they become permanent. And this act was created over 100 years ago to protect U.S. shipbuilding. And what has happened to U.S. shipbuilding since that time is we've become some of the most uncompetitive shipbuilding in the world. Now, is there a role for U.S. shipbuilding? Absolutely. There's a role for U.S. shipbuilding when it comes to national defense. But we're not talking about national defense here. We're talking about private industry. And the truth of the matter is this rule was passed in the late 1800s as a way to protect domestic shipping routes between Seattle and Portland and Anchorage, Alaska, as well as Puerto Rico shipping routes to protect those who owned the ships and the shipbuilding for those routes and who manage those routes.
Right.
And as a result, Alaskans pay more for all the goods that we bring in to Alaska.
Picking winners and losers again. There's no free market. Somebody could offer a free market solution. They don't want to can't do that. Can't do that. All right. Nick Begich, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go. Okay, Nick Begich continues with us, candidate for U.S. House. As always, bringing Nick on is educational and entertaining and enlightening all at once. It's all the 3 E's that we strive for in this program. Nick, I'm sure you've seen the Ben-Hur videos. I'm sure you've seen all the videos that are going on down at the border right now, the southern border specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I get a little concerned when I see the amount of people that are coming. You saw them rush the Texas National Guard at the border here recently. That was actually one of the few videos where I've actually seen women in the crowds of people rushing the border at the same time. Because up until now, there's been a lot of military-age males crossing the border with no families, although supposedly they're all doing it for their family kind of thing. And now, of course, we got the report here of 3 weeks ago or something that the number of Chinese nationals crossing the border increased upwards of 40,000. Normally it was just a few thousand. And then they said the Border Patrol said that they've, over the last 90 days, that they'd picked up something like 35 or 40,000 Chinese nationals crossing the border. Border security is important. I'm a libertarian, and I know libertarians are supposed to be all about open borders and all this kind of stuff. But the problem is that in a utopian ideal, that would be great. But today we've got people who are dedicating their entire lives to the destruction of the West. And when they're bringing those ideologies across the border and they have a plan to disrupt some of these things, that's a problem. Border security is an important thing that we need to be, that we're failing at, really, quite honestly. If you're watching those videos, we're failing at it. What are your thoughts on the border?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. We are failing miserably. But I don't think that's an accident. I think it's by design. And I think the Biden administration, it is very clear. Anyone who's taken time to look at the charts under the Trump administration and then later under the Biden administration, you see a massive increase in illegal immigration. And we're seeing that in part because the Biden administration is essentially inviting these people into our nation illegally. And in some cases, is actually flying them into our nation. They don't even have to go through the border. They just come, they get on an aircraft and they're paid to fly to the United States. And you have to ask yourself, what in the world would possess someone to do this, to bring this many people into our, most of them don't speak English. They don't have any way of making a living when they get here. They're given free services, and I use the term free loosely, but we're all paying for it. But these services like EBT cards and housing and transportation and healthcare and schooling and education.
New York just issued credit cards to $15,000 on these credit cards to these all these undocumented folks who are there in New York right now on the taxpayer's dime. $15,000 per card.
Look, if minimum wage is $15, that's 1,000 hours of free time that they were given. 6 months of free work handed to somebody. Think about that. Think about how much work went into paying the taxes necessary to pay for that. That's stealing. That's theft. These people should be sent home, right? And you gotta recognize the reason why this is happening. Okay, the reason why the Biden administration is doing this is because they recognize that in 2030 they're headed for a major set of losses in the reapportionment of during the census. They're going to lose House seats around the nation because people have been moving out of blue states and into red states. And the reason that's important is not just the House, it's also the presidency, because that's the way in which the Electoral College works, right? If a bunch of people move out of California into a place like Texas or Florida, that gives Texas and Florida more electoral votes in the college, in the Electoral College. It determines who the president's going to be going forward. They're bringing these people in because under the U.S. Constitution, as it's been interpreted right now, non-citizens count toward apportionment. And right now, they've brought in more than 13 the equivalent of more than 13 House reps in illegal migrants. There's nearly it depends which measure you're looking at, but there's about 14 million people in our country illegally right now. And what the Biden administration has done is they've said, look, while you're waiting in our inordinately backed up judicial system for your day in court to talk about your asylum claim or whatever, we're going to give you a work. We're going to give you a work so you can stay here. And those visas are good for up to 5 years. Their plan isn't to let these people come in and then figure things out and then either send them home or keep them here. Their plan is to keep them here. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. And it's being perpetrated by the Democrat Party in order to achieve permanent power.
We just lost you here for a second there. For them to receive permanent power, basically, and trying to bolster their roles in that regard, Nick.
That's right. That's their goal. I mean, that's Joe Biden's goal. Is his legacy is he's hoping is to create permanent power for the Democrat Party. And the reality is these are, I don't even like to call them immigrants. I think they're migrants. They're illegal migrants in our nation. And we need to facilitate their judicious return to their point of origin.
I mean, this country was built on immigration. And so it's not like we don't want immigrants here. It's that there's a process, and the process needs to be, if it needs to be streamlined, then streamline it. If it needs to be made better, make it better. We're talking about people who came into the country illegally, violating the laws, and yet they're being picked up and bolstered by the state on the taxpayer's dollar, and they're putting a burden on many places. I mean, New York found out, right? They're finding out now. I mean, Kay Hochul, the governor of New York, was all about, oh yeah, let him in here. And then 3 months later, she's like, whoa, this has got to stop, because all of a sudden they're seeing what the actual cost of something like that is, and they realize it's unsustainable. Again, there's nobody saying that there shouldn't be immigration in the country. What we're saying is the immigration needs to be legal and handled.
That's right, and we need to be smart about who we're bringing in, right? If you were to try to get into a nation like Australia and you wanted to emigrate with an E to Australia, do you know what their standards are? They're extraordinary. They're extraordinarily high standards. You can't be over a certain age. You got to be under a certain age because they don't want their equivalent Social Security program to end up paying for you, right? You've got to show that you can contribute to their society, that you have the ability to be culturally congruent in some way, right? And this isn't unique to that nation. It's pretty common among most nations that, you know, they want to make sure that the people that they're bringing into the country are going to contribute meaningfully to advancing that nation. That's smart immigration policy. And we need to have a smart immigration policy. Frankly, the people that have been waiting in line in many cases for 5 or 10 years to become American citizens, the kind of people that we really do want in our nation, who add value to our nation, they have to go through hoop after hoop after hoop. It's very difficult to become an American above board. It's becoming very easy to live in America under the table. And people are going to follow the incentives. And the government is setting up the incentive such that it's easier to be here illegally than it is to be here legally as an immigrant.
You look at the immigration laws surrounding Mexico. You try to become a Mexican citizen outside of that. I mean, it's ironic that we've got it going the way we have it going on. We're down to the last couple of minutes here, Nick. So I want to give you the chance. Any topic we didn't hit or any point that you'd like to make before the end of the show. Now is the time to crack on and get to it here.
Well, I think that there is one issue that we hadn't touched on yet, and that's related to personal privacy. And I believe that we need to update the constitutional rights that we have as citizens for the digital age. One of the interesting things that happened over the weekend, sad to see it, but major breach at AT&T. They leaked the social security numbers and personal data of 76 million Americans. We see a FISA renewal happening. It's coming up in the Congress, in the House, and we've seen that secret judicial process be abused year after year. Mechanisms to spy on the American people, by the FBI, by other governmental organizations that purchase open source intelligence information, things like your credit card transaction history, your mobile data history, where you were when you were there, who you were standing next to, right? This information is available for purchase on the open market, and our government is buying it and using it against us to surveil the American people. I think we need a digital Bill of Rights for the American people. It's something that hasn't gotten a lot of attention in this election cycle, but I think now more than ever with the advent of AI and some of these other technologies, it's really important that we're defending the privacy rights of the American people, and that's something that I think needs more attention.
Yeah, the Inspector General reports on the FISA courts said abuses in the thousands by FBI agents. In fact, some of them lying on the request for the FISA warrants. It's got to stop. But I think it's rolling downhill at this point. It's got momentum. I don't know what's going to happen. All right, Nick Begich III, Alaskans for Nick, Begich.com. Thank you, Nick, for coming on board. Hold the line. Folks, we're out of time. We got more coming up tomorrow. Brad Keithley, Chris Story. And we will be back with more then. Be kind, love one another, live well. All right, Nick, I'll give you the final bite at the apple here as we coast ahead. I mean, the FISA thing is a whole. I mean, we could do a whole show just on the FISA abuses and what's going on with that. The fact that we get between free speech and the government overreach at this point. It's pretty scary. I mean, people like Snowden, Julian Assange, all these leaks that have come out over the years. These should have opened Americans' eyes instead of being outraged by the fact that, Edward Snowden let all this information out. He did it because he wanted you to know what the government was doing. Not that he was trying to release government secrets. He was trying to tell people this is what your government's doing. And it's kind of spooky.
It's very concerning. It's extraordinarily concerning. As someone who spent their entire career in technology, I can tell you if the average person out there knew what was not just possible, but being done actively by the government and by the private sector to manipulate the American people, there'd be an uprising, be an uproar. I mean, we saw this bill come through on TikTok, right? There's a lot that's happening with these algorithms that are used. They're engineered, okay? And it's not just TikTok. I don't want to just pick on them, but these algorithms are engineered to addict the user. They're engineered to addict the user, okay? So they literally hire PhD level scientists to figure out how to get someone to continue to engage with their app a little bit more, because that's a revenue model for most of these platforms. And it's a problem, not just for that reason, but also because many of these platforms, they target children, adolescents, people whose brains are still forming up. Their dopamine receptor systems are still developing, and they're not equipped. They don't have what I call the cognitive firewalls to even protect themselves. They don't even understand what is happening to them through the use of these toolkits. And that kind of science has advanced in government form. The Chinese government is fully aware. In China, you're not able to download TikTok. They have a different version of that application that uses that algorithm to push things like science and math on children, as opposed to the content that we see in the United States. We've got to get smarter about this stuff. We got to get smarter about this. The mind doesn't have firewalls like a computer does. And our privacy rights are paramount in the digital age. If we don't preserve those rights in the digital age, we're setting ourselves up for a level of manipulation that we can't even imagine. And the problem is, young people are growing up in that environment. They're the proverbial frog boiling in the water, right? That the temperature just went up a little bit every year, and they never realized this is not the kind of life that was it was imagined or designed by our founders. You're supposed to have freedom from this sort of thing. And I think we need to make sure that the American people's privacy rights are enshrined and encoded in the Constitution. And I think that time is long overdue.
I agree. Nick, as always, it's good to talk with you. We'll see you again here in a couple weeks, and we'll let you have a little bit more free reign on some of the things you want to talk about. I think this is some important stuff. But if you want to find out more about Nick, out on the web, AlaskansForNickBegich.com. Go out there, throw a few shekels in the bucket, get him going. 50%, 50-50 with Nancy's girl, Mary Peltola, right now.
That's right.
I can't wait to see. The ranked choice is going to be the question. What will Dahlstrom do, and more? We'll find out that as we go forward. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on board, Nick, as always.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
All right, folks. We are out of time for today. Tomorrow is another one. We will see you then. Again, be kind, love one another, live well. Yes, even Harold. We'll be back with more tomorrow, right here on The Michael Duke Show.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.